Hey, this is Darren from Property Prosperity. I hope you've all been enjoying the Olympics. I know I've been enjoying it, and I don't know if you actually watched the men's road race the other night, but one of the hot contenders for the gold medal was Richie Porte, and if you know anything about cycling, then you know that he's one of the best in the world. He's main contender in the Tour de France and a whole pile of different things. So he was definitely up there with a good chance of winning the gold medal. And you imagine the amount of the elite level that these guys are training at, and being at that extreme level, they're constantly planning for everything. They're making sure everything they do is meticulously planned out to make sure they can obviously have the highest level of fitness, eat the right food, get massage and chiro and physio, and their bike has to be perfect essentially. So they're planning everything out to try and make sure that they can be at their elite level when they get to the Olympics and that day when they're competing. So the unfortunate thing for Richie is that going down the hill there in Rio, he got caught on the edge in the gutter and then ended up flipping his bike over and breaking his collarbone. So how does that matter, and how does that apply to us in the world of property? I suppose the thing to understand is there's some things you can't plan for. At the end of the day, all you can do is you can do your absolute best. Prepare as much as you possibly can. Try and cover every base you possibly can. Ask questions to anyone that you possibly can to try and get as much information. So that might be your conveyancer, your mortgage broker, if it's a development, your surveyor, obviously your friends and family. If you've got someone like a development consultant or a builder, depending on what the actual process is involved. One way to try and give you the danger you get when you're buying a property or you're doing a development is, once you bought it. And so if you've made a mistake, you're pretty much stuck with it. So, and it's really expensive to buy a property because you've got stamp duty, and when you go to sell it, you've got agents' fees and you've got holding costs while you're hanging into the property. So you really want to make sure you do get all the information up front. What they call that, the word they use for, or two words they use for doing your research, they call that due diligence. So what you can actually, and a lot of people don't really know this, you got the opportunity, you can actually, when you're putting in an offer for a property, you can actually ask the agent, or ask the agent to ask the owner, whether they can allow you a little bit of time to try and get some more information if you need to. The benefit of this, you can get in there and start chatting to the agent, wheel and deal on the agent, negotiating the property, particularly if it's on a really, it's a really good opportunity, you have a chance that you might miss out on the property. Then what you might want to do then is, negotiate with the agent and just make sure you're definitely going to get the property, because sometimes, particularly with developments and larger scale developments, this research you might have to do, it might actually cost you some money. You might have to get an engineer to come out and do some analysis. You might have stormwater issues, retaining wall issues, easements, trees, a whole pile of different things. You can't do that for every property you're looking at purchasing. So what you could do is if there is you definitely want to buy it. Obviously, don't waste people's time if you don't want to buy it. But if you definitely want to buy it, subject to certain conditions, then what you can do is go to the agent and just say, hey, can I put a subject to doing some extra due diligence? And so what you need to, that needs to be realistic as far as how long you need to be able to do that. Because the thing to understand when you're putting an offer in on a property or signing a contract with a property, you can basically put whatever offer you want on the purchase. The issue is, is the owner going to accept that offer? So obviously you can start bringing in more and more clauses. The issue with that is that the owner, particularly if they've got someone else to choose from, they're going to go with the person with the least amount of clauses because it's the least risk for them. Because the danger, particularly for me, from my perspective as a real estate agent, when I'm trying to sell a property, and if an owner agrees and accepts an offer, then I can sort of leave it on the market, but it's pretty much off the market. If someone else is coming in saying they want to put in an offer or sign a contract, legally I can't sign a contract or accept any other offers once the owner's already accepted one offer. So essentially, that person that's putting in the second offer, then I'd have to let them know that we already got an offer and it's already been accepted. So 9 times out of 10, that person's going to look elsewhere. And then they're quite unlikely they're going to come back and have a look at it a second time. So this is where the danger comes. If the owner's accepting an offer subject to certain conditions, then the danger is there. Even though you can sort of leave it on the market to a period of time, but really people are going to know it's sold, which means people are going to move on. The danger of that is the longer that period of uncertainty is, the longer that the conditions last for, the more limbo the property is sitting, and the more you're losing the opportunity of building that momentum up when you're trying to sell the property. So that's some of the difficulties as far as from the owner's perspective of whether they want to accept conditions. So generally, from the owner's perspective, they don't want any conditions. You know, they want cash, unconditional, settle in 30 days type thing, and that'd be the ultimate. Hey Andrew, thanks for joining. And so yeah, so that's pretty much the ultimate as far as from the owner's perspective. From the purchaser's perspective, you want the longer the settlement, the better, because it gives you more time to, you know, do your research and do a bit more time. And, you know, you might make it subject to finance or subject to the sale of your house, or, like I said, one of the extra clauses, it could be subject to due diligence. Generally, most owners have never heard of that clause before, so they might be a little bit wary. So that's one reason why it might not be accepted. And secondly, they're not going to give you huge amounts of time. So it might only be a week or 2 weeks. If you're saying, you know, subject to you getting approvals by council, that might take 3 or 4 months or 12 months, depending on what it's going to be. So they're less likely to accept something that's, you know, that sort of situation. But if it's only a couple of weeks or even a week, you know, they're probably more open to it. And again, that gives you more time. And the benefit of that is once you've, you know, locked away the contract, the owner's agreed to sell it to you. The owner can't sell it to anybody else, so you've got the opportunity then to go and do your investigation, knowing you've definitely got the property. That means if you do spend money to investigate your options, then you're not wasting, you know, that money, because if you go ahead, then that's, you know, that was money well spent. Even if you choose not to go ahead, it'll be money well spent because you've chosen not to go ahead with a property because it wouldn't have been viable. And so even if you had to spend money, it was a good investment because it saved you spending. You know, imagine a $400,000 property and you pay stamp duty. That's $20,000 gone just on stamp duty. So yeah, definitely a clause you might want to look at. And so yeah, hopefully that makes some sense. You can sort of see in Richie Port's example, unfortunately he couldn't put any clauses in there to alleviate the problem of falling off and breaking his collarbone. But, you know, from our perspective, we can always be thinking about what some of these things are, you know, the unexpected issues that we, you know, might not be able to see on the surface of it, but once we've signed up and agreed to purchase the property and the owner's agreed to sell it to us, then we've got more time to go and try and research some of those things. But always understand there's always unknowns, and there's, you know, and sometimes if it's the unknown unknowns, which are probably the worst thing. And I suppose that's where experience comes in. The more experience you have, the less, you know, less mistakes you're going to make, or less mistakes you probably have made in the past, which you learn from. And so basically that means, you know, there's less unknowns because you've just done it all before. So if you've got the opportunity, obviously the more times you do it, the better you're going to get at it. If you don't, then my advice is just get someone to give you some advice that's done it a lot before, that can, you know, leverage off their experience. There's no point trying to do this alone because, you know, there's people out there trying to help you along the way. So Andrew, I can see he's joining. Darren, are you seeing an increase of people using super for investment properties? I think that's a very good question, Andrew. It really depends on the commercial side of things. Probably people are looking at, and as far as self-managed super funds are looking at, they're looking for rental returns, or they're comparing it relative to other investment strategies, I suppose. So they've got the opportunity of whacking their money into shares, or, you know, leaving it cash, which cash they're not going to get a lot of money from. Shares at the moment, you know, depending on what the shares are, the difficulty you get with shares is the ability to borrow money in shares isn't that great. Likewise, the same sort of situation as far as property. In a super, you are restricted as far as what your borrowing capacity is, so that's going to create a bit of an issue. So people are going to be, you'll need a lot more cash than you otherwise would if you were just buying an investment property, you know, not in a self-managed super fund. Some of the other things to take into account too with self-managed super funds and buying a property, you can't actually develop properties in a self-managed super fund as well. So, you know, if you're looking at buying and building, then that's, you know, not really an option. If you're looking at buying and developing, that's not really an option as far as self-managed super funds go. So it has to really be an income-producing property from day one, pretty much. So you have to buy the property and start renting it out from scratch. Whereas if you buy and build, you know, it starts out as a block of land, which is not creating income, so it's not really income-producing property. Likewise, the development, you have same sort of issues. So there is issues associated with that. The other issue with self-managed super funds, they're quite expensive to set up. Obviously, if you've already got one set up, then that could be fine. But there is setting up trusts, and there's ongoing maintenance costs of managing the super fund going forward, which can be quite expensive too. So you really have to have a sizable amount of money if you're investing in super to buy properties. If you've just got, you know, what your average person has in super, which isn't very much, then you're probably finding a lot less people that are into buying properties through their super fund. But if you are looking for a good return on money, then and you've got heaps of cash in your super, a lot of people are probably swaying more towards commercial properties because the rental return is a lot better than you otherwise would, and they can just sit it aside there and assuming you've got a good quality tenant, You know, you've got a 5 plus 5 plus 5, you know, type thing investment. So it's a lot longer term investment for a lot better return with a lot less hassles as far as having good quality tenants. So hopefully that's made sense, Andrew. Yes, so there is definitely people out there that can give you advice on self-managed super funds. Again, I suppose you really have to just do it with a perspective of, you know, are they giving you the best advice for you? I suppose just get as much advice from a few different people as possible and then make your own decisions at the end of the day, I suppose. So thanks for joining, everybody, and hopefully you've liked what I had to say. If you haven't liked what I had to say, then still click on the like button anyway, and if you have liked it, then click on the like button. If you think someone might be interested in knowing about, if they're thinking about getting into property and you think they need to think about some of those unexpected items I've talked about, then yeah, click on the share button. I'm sure they'll find it interesting. If you've got some other comments like Andrew, then feel free to put a comment in the comment box and I'm happy to answer any of your questions in the future. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.